I'm Joshua Sparrow at the Brazelton Touchpoints Center. Thank you so much for joining us today from around the country and around the world for Mindfulness and Self-Compassion, a Brazelton Touchpoints Center webinar in collaboration with the Center for Child and Family Wellbeing at the University of Washington, the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, the Community for Mindful Parenting, and the Charter for Compassion. And let me also thank our Brazelton Touchpoints production team, Kayla Savelli and Autumn Strasbaugh, and I want to thank Juan Rabin and Yafa Marit who have made all of these webinars possible, and our three presenters who I will introduce to you in just a moment. So before introducing our presenters, I just wanted to share a few words about what I've been hearing, which is really a big part of why we've been doing these webinars. I've been listening to a lot of very thoughtful, smart people saying that we might just be in the midst of history in the making. The time for the murders of Black and brown people to stop was a very long time ago, several hundred years ago. And I'm hearing lots of people coming together to say that they think this might just be our moment now to make this happen. It is a time, as Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, the first Black woman elected to Congress from Massachusetts, it is a time, she recently reflected, of feeling gutted and exhausted and encouraged and emboldened. Ta-Nehisi Coates, author of Between the World and Me, a nonfiction work in the form of a letter to his son about being Black in America, said in a recent interview, "This is the first time that I think a lot of us have felt that the battle is legitimately joined. Significant swaths of people in non-Black communities have come to perceive something of the deep pain and suffering experienced by Black Americans. I think that's different," he said. It is hard work to make historic change, to end systemic racism, to end the murders and the racial disproportionality of COVID-19 deaths, to end the racial disproportionality of equitable access to health care and healthy outcomes, to opportunity and to assets. It is hard work to make historic change in our own times, and it is hard work to own this time as ours. And it may seem impossible. Yet Martin Luther King said in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech in 1964, "I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word." So it may seem impossible, and yet Nelson Mandela said in a special convocation at Harvard in 1998, he said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." It is our hope that by coming together today, we can open up a space to hold the exhaustion, to hold the deep pain and suffering, to ground ourselves in simple practices to provide at least some small amount of comfort, to help strengthen ourselves for the hard work of ending racism, and to bring these practices back to transform where and how we work, to transform where and how we work into places and into ways of heart and of healing, where all are safe and all are free. To guide us in this work today, we have three extraordinary leaders in finding and lifting up the mindfulness and compassion that is in each of us and that is all around us. Maria Gehl is deeply committed to supporting early relationships with a spirit of nurturing and inquiry. In her current role at 0 to 3, directing the Mindfulness in Early Childhood Project, Maria focuses on increasing understanding and use of mindfulness and compassion strategies in early childhood settings and parenting. Dr. Candice Thomas is the Executive Director of First 8 Memphis, building a collaborative early care and education system in Memphis, Tennessee, and helping individuals, programs, and systems of care experience transformation by learning, doing, and being. Her interests in contemplative self-care and intergenerational trauma build power to influence public policy and diversity-informed practice. Prior to joining First State Memphis, Candice was a senior program officer at the Irving Harris Foundation, where she co-authored the Diversity-Informed Tenets, which you can find posted on the Brazelton Touchpoints Facebook page in English and Spanish, or you can simply do a Google search. Galia, Tyano, Ronen, a certified mindful self-compassion trainer and clinical psychologist, loves the diversity of connections with people, nature, arts, body, music, and spirit. With her local community, without any government help, she creates culture festivals based on the generosity, togetherness, free will, spirit, and talent of citizens living in Kiryat Shimon. And she's joining us all the way from Israel, and I hate to think even what time it is there, Galia. It is such an honor and privilege to be with our three presenters today. I don't know how we could ever thank you enough for the gift of your time, especially these days where there's so much work to do in this moment of ours, for the gift of your wisdom, presence, compassion, and courage. So let me turn first to you, Maria.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks for the invitation to be here. Can you all hear me? Good.
I can hear you.
Great. So I think we'll start off before I start talking. I'll just invite us to do a practice together. And one thing we know is that tuning into our senses is a great tool for helping us really come into the present moment, because our senses are happening in the present moment. It can be a way to help us calm our nervous system. And it's also a way to focus on the things that really help us feel resourced and supported, and also savor pleasant and joyful experiences. And so as we get ready to enter into this space of learning together today, just invite you to do a practice. We just call it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and this is a practice you can even do with children. So I just invite you to explore your environment that you're in right now and identify 5 things that you can see. You might name them and also just notice and maybe identify something that you can see that feels nice for you. It might be a color, it could be the view outside your window, or a particular painting or photograph you have. Just finding something visually that feels supportive and resourcing to you in the moment. The next sense is listening. So opening your ears and listening to sounds that are inside the room or even from farther away. And if it's helpful to close your eyes to tune into listening, you can do that. Just identifying 4 things you can hear. And again, taking a moment to savor one of those sounds that feels comforting and supporting for you today. And then you can reach out and use your sense of touch to find 3 things in your environment. Tuning into the texture, noticing the sensory experience, how that might soothe you and feel nice. Even giving another being a pet if you have a dog or a cat nearby. And then noticing 2 things in your environment that you can smell. If you have something specific, I invite you to go check it out. Some flowers in the room or a plant or maybe a candle. Just savoring the scent. And finally, noticing one taste. So you might take a sip or a nibble of something that you have with you, or just close your eyes for a moment and notice the taste that's lingering in your mouth. Just coming back to the screen. Thanks for sharing, some of you who have just shared what you were listening to or tasting, and just noticing that this experience of tuning into our senses is always happening in the present moment, and that's something that can really give us a sense of self-care, can give us a sense of grounding, and also prepare us to really be present in the moment that we're in. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about our project at 0 to 3 on mindfulness in early childhood. And if you're not familiar, 0 to 3 is a national center that focuses on making sure that all infants and toddlers have a strong start in life. And we do this through working with professionals, policymakers, and developing resources for parents. And so our mindfulness project is just about 3 years old, and we started this project with a discovery period. And so we looked at the literature, what the literature said about how mindfulness might impact parenting and caregiving in the early years. We also asked providers what they were doing around mindfulness, what their interests were, and how they might be bringing this into their work. We also did some key informant interviews with researchers and stakeholders who were interested in mindfulness and compassion practices in the early childhood space. We learned some things that weren't surprising and some that were. And one thing that I certainly resonated with me was the understanding that most of the people who were doing this work, which was happening at a very grassroots level, and I would say still is, really were inspired and motivated by their personal experience with practice. And so they were bringing the benefits that they felt they received from practicing compassion and mindfulness in their own lives into their workspace. And we saw a lot of providers reflecting that they were doing this a lot of times by bringing practices to children and families. And again, sort of sharing that motivation and excitement about the experience they had. We also asked about the barriers to this work, and again, not surprising, especially in the early childhood space, we really heard that buy-in from leadership, that time and resources were limiting, and many times people were really doing this work on their own. So they didn't necessarily have a lot of partners in the work. So we really took that information and decided to focus our work on thinking about the context. So we know that these practices, as Josh mentioned, and as we just experienced, can really be supportive for us as individuals, but these are also practices that are about relationship. At 0 to 3, we use a quote from Jerry Paul quite often that says, "How you are is as important as what you do." And in the early childhood field, we really understand that as how we show up with others, how we show up with the children and families we're working with, the quality of our presence, our capacity for attunement. And so we really think about this also in how we're doing internally and recognizing the impacts of how we care for ourselves and how we treat ourselves as influencing how we show up and treat children and families and coworkers and peers. So with that in mind, we really wanted to elevate the idea of these practices in a sense, focusing them on the relationship. And so our endeavor really has become more about shifting culture, thinking about how culture might shift in organizations and even systems towards being more mindful and compassionate. And so we're really exploring, what does it mean to be a mindfully reflective and compassionate organization? And how does compassion for ourselves and others really get operationalized in the work that we do, particularly in early childhood settings? So how is it showing up with the children and families, in our relationships with coworkers, in our organizations as a whole, and even in our communities? So we can pull up the slide now, and I'll also just invite you um, to type in the chat box what it means for you. If you think about what is happening in your organization that might reflect these values of compassion, self-compassion, and mindfulness, or maybe how you would imagine them being operationalized in your organization. And the slide you see are just some ways that we've been talking about how this might show up. And it recognizes that many of these practices, we begin with that intrapersonal place. So really giving ourselves gestures of self-care. And I know the past 2 webinars has included a lot of practices around that, that we really think and explore our thoughts and our values internally. But then we bring this knowledge and learning into the environment of interpersonal activity. So how we work with children and families, and think about, the gestures of care when we're modeling self-care, but also how we're caring for others. How mindfulness and compassion show up in our communication, how we share and talk about our emotions. And then even expanding that idea into the leadership and organizational level. So thinking about how these practices are reflected in the policies and practices of the organization. How do they get operationalized in the mission and our activities that we're doing together as a group? And as 0 to 3 has done this work and dug in more, one of the things that we developed was a toolkit, which is available freely on our website. It's called Getting Started with Mindfulness, a toolkit for early childhood organizations. And I think we'll share that in the chat, and it will also come as a link to a resource following the webinar. But this toolkit really talks about, how mindfulness and compassion relate to the particular work we do as early childhood professionals, and gives kind of a high-level roadmap for how you might go about bringing mindfulness in a larger way into your organization. So taking it beyond that personal practice. And right now we're piloting a 6-month community of practice for organizations who are interested in bringing mindfulness and compassion more fully into the work they're doing. And we're working with 10 different organizations that are very diverse, including a child health center. We have a multi-model home visiting program, a behavioral health center, a public library system, and even a zoo. And so we are super excited to see the different ways that organizations are envisioning and bringing this work alive in their work beyond offering personal practice. So certainly we see things like what we've been doing here, kind of starting meetings and including mindfulness moments in our work together, bringing it into the reflective supervision space, but also really considering and thinking about it as part of larger initiatives, things like staff wellness, and really thinking about how the organizational setting is creating space for reflection and contemplative practice. And more recently, thinking about this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and thinking about how these practices really support us in exploring the work and finding stamina for the work that we need to do around this. I love, on the last webinar, the group from Seattle Children's and Odessa Brown, their program is called Finding Strength for the Long Haul. And I think it really speaks to the opportunity and the tool that this practice is for doing the kinds of challenging work with kindness and openness as we try to shift our culture and create systems and organizations that are truly equitable and reflect the values that we have so that it really becomes possible for every infant and toddler to have the start that they deserve. So I am going to turn it over to our next speaker now, but I look forward to sharing some additional resources with you in the follow-up.
Thank you so much, Maria. I just wanted to mention before I move on that there are all kinds of really wonderful comments on the practice that you let us in, and all kinds of resonance with how to build mindfulness and compassion and self-compassion into classrooms, into home visiting, into programs and systems. There's all kinds of wisdom that we're hearing from folks all around the country and other countries as well. And also just to say, you mentioned the Finding Strength for the Long Haul project, Odessa Brown, to say that we had folks from that work present at our last Mindfulness and Self-Compassion webinar. And so you all can go to the Brazelton Touchpoints Center website and go to the webinars tab, and you can listen to the recording which featured their work. So let's now go to Dr. Thomas. Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Josh and Maria and Kayla and Autumn for getting us all together and for all of the technical help to launch this today. And of course, Ron Rabin for organizing all of this and bringing me along. So as Josh said, I'm Candice Thomas. I am the Executive Director of First Aid Memphis, a new early childhood organization in Memphis, Tennessee. And I'm just really honored to be here and to be amongst mindful friends. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a mindfulness program that I was a part of in Chicago Public Schools, and how, and my work with families to learn about how African American and Latinx parents integrate mindfulness at home. So before I get started, I just want to acknowledge all of the people and organizations and institutions that either helped rooted my mindfulness as a child or that really supported my work with the community over the last 5 years or so. Calm Classroom, K to second grade, is a program that we started in Chicago Public Schools in 2017. Its effort was to bring mindfulness to kindergarten, first and second grade students. This program was really to help students regulate their emotion, to really help students learn how to refocus and sort of shake off negative energy when possible, with overall goals of to really help students manage their emotions, learn how to manage their emotions so they can learn more effectively and improve their communication in the classroom. As my role was to facilitate mindfulness with kids in kindergarten, first and second grade, as well as do family engagement and outreach to the families of the students to really learn from the families how they were integrating mindfulness at home, and learn from them what did they think of and how did they think of mindfulness. So to get us started today, I want to do a short practice with you that we did with our students. So I want to get us started to get you all to sit back in your chairs, or if you're seated on the floor, or even if you're standing, to be rooted in your practice. And I'm going to ask you to practice with me an activity we called I Am Calm. So feel your feet flat on the floor. Sit up straight and comfortably in your chair, or if you're standing, stand up straight. Maybe you can stand against a wall. Lay your hands flat on your thighs, or where, if you're standing, just let your arms fall to the side. Relax your shoulders and let your whole body be still. And feel the air going in and moving out of your nose or your mouth, or if you can feel your breath more present in your belly or in your chest, just notice where you're feeling the air. And as the air moves through your nose, say to yourself, I. So you breathe in and you think I, and you breathe out and you think am, calm. You breathe in and think I, and breathe out and think am calm. I am calm. I am calm. Now feel the air moving in and out of your nose. Take in a big breath and breathe out slowly. Notice how you feel. So as a part of our program, we did practices like that with young children. We use bells. We also use what we called a mind jar, where if you're looking at the screen, you can see me shaking up the jar, and you can see the glitter floating toward the bottom. Those are some of the resources we use in our classroom. And as a part of my work, I was really interested in understanding if parent mindfulness, of the parents of these students, if their mindfulness led to decrease intergenerational trauma. And what I understood was that if we all carry intergenerational trauma, which we do, then we also carry intergenerational wisdom. And it's in our genes and in our DNA. So intergenerational trauma, as you all may know, is really the experience of the same trauma or the effects of traumatic experiences transmitted from one generation to subsequent generations. And it can be passed down psychologically or psychically through family behavior, through witnessing violence, through biological transmission. And my argument is that intergenerational trauma is passed down via our culture, via our society. And if we are not seeing that right now, with COVID-19 around the world and the protests happening in the United States and around the world, then we all have to wake up, because it is happening. Intergenerational trauma is here and we're experiencing it right now. So the study that I did was really trying to understand if parent trauma, therefore intergenerational trauma, can be buffered by mindfulness, parent self-care, and parent self-efficacy. And what I learned is that, first of all, there is a lot of intergenerational trauma in this group of African American and Latinx families in Chicago. There's a high prevalence of intergenerational trauma in this population and their 6-year-old children. And most of that trauma was trauma lived through systems of oppression in our country. So the oppression that we're all seeing happening, if not in our own individual lives, but also if you turn on your TV, then you're feeling how our system of oppression that was created from the very beginning of these lands that term the United States have impacted all of us and live within all of us. So our program was rooted in helping children understand and use mindfulness in the classroom, as well as me, particularly my interest in how our parents experiencing and using mindfulness to buffer intergenerational trauma. And one thing that I learned with my group of parents of African American and Latinx parents is that some of the ways in which we talk about mindfulness, this group of parents did not talk about mindfulness in the same way. And so when I interviewed parents and asked them if they had ever heard of the term mindfulness, they said, nope, we never heard of it. In fact, only 13% of the parents that I talked to heard of the term mindfulness. And when I asked them, so what do you think mindfulness is? One parent said, well, I think mindfulness is like thinking of others, you know, how others feel, pay attention to their situation. Another parent said, when I asked, what do you think mindfulness is? They said, mindfulness is seeing the needs of others and trying to help them. So when you see here is that they're thinking of mindfulness not for themselves, not as a practice for calming themselves, but they're being mindful of other people. And so this is, what you can argue is that this is also a cultural value, that mindfulness is not just about oneself and trying to find calm or do a practice for your own well-being, but there are cultural values in the African American and Latinx communities that mindfulness is about holding the other. So while they were not able to articulate in the same way that the general population, or more specifically the white, middle, and upper middle class population talks about mindfulness, they had an incredibly high trait mindfulness percentage in this sample. Really, most of the people in my sample did have high levels of mindfulness. And as I said, when you ask them, what is it when you think of mindfulness? How are you mindful? They said, we take deep breaths, we're aware of our surroundings, our feelings, our emotions. And people said, we're just trying to be in the here and now. So as a part of understanding mindfulness for this community and trying to see how mindfulness interrupted intergenerational trauma, I wanted to know, how do African American and Latinx parents take care of themselves in the midst of stress and trauma? And so what you see here is that the parents in this study took care of themselves in a lot of ways. Most of the parents said they took care of themselves by taking baths. They took care of themselves by listening to their thoughts and their attitudes and beliefs, and that they love themselves. And by loving themselves, they're staying in contact with family and important people in their lives. Spirituality and prayer was a really high level of ways in which parents in this group took care of themselves. And so what I found was that this group of African American and Latinx parents, while they did not know and they were not using the mindfulness in the way that some of us may use it or some of you may use it, there were high levels. And what I really determined is what I saw, that parents had high levels of what I call contemplative self-care. There were intentional, behavioral, and spiritual ways that parents took care of themselves, and by being present in the moment. And so what I found was that self-care was really around slowing down, being quiet, and being present in the moment. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what contemplative self-care is based on the parents and this group of parents that I worked with. So one parent said, I always take me a moment. I take me a moment to try to recalibrate, you know? If I'm feeling like I'm being overstressed with being a single dad, I just give me a moment. I just sit in the hallway, I breathe, I think, walk down the block, look up at the sky, pray, come back and start all over. So this was a parent who said that they never heard of the term mindfulness, but you can see here, this parent is mindful. Another parent said that they try to get up 2 hours before their kids get up, before anybody else in the house wakes up, so that they can take a shower, get ready for the day, and kind of brush off the day before. And when you ask parents around how are they present in the moment, they say, wherever I'm at, that's what I'm focused on. Another parent said to me, the only thing you can control is your reactions to situations. And I'm constantly, on a daily basis, working on that. And then another parent said, I don't let the thought rest in my mind. I don't allow it to consume me. So that really is present moment awareness, not letting the thought consume you, not letting the thought rest in your mind. It's coming in and it's going out. So around quiet and contemplative self-care, a parent said to me that sometimes my husband and I go to walk in the park in the morning, like we only go talk together, because sometimes we want to go out for dinner. This is before the pandemic, obviously, and sometimes we don't have anybody to take care of the kids, so we have to stay in the house with them. But in the morning, like at 5:30 or 6 a.m., we go down to the park. I'm going to give you another example of parents saying that they slow down. I'm going to start with the right. So a parent said, this was in the context of feeling, of having an argument with a partner. This parent said, so in that time when they're having an argument with the partner, that I will slow down. There will be no hollering, there will be no cussing, there will be actually, you know, not having a big, bad, intimidating voice. I'm going to be rooted in understanding. It's going to be in compassion, because I need to understand where the other person is coming from. And then another moment of slowing down, another example of that, is another parent talking about having an argument with the spouse, and this parent saying that in that moment, I have to stay quiet. I have to stay quiet. And one thing that is helpful is to stay quiet. I'm not mastering that, this parent said, but I am still working on it. So what I argue is that African-American and Latinx parents that I worked with in Chicago was not using the same terms of mindfulness that we are using often in our work. But what I was seeing was that parents consciously buffer trauma in their children and intentionally care for themselves in times of stress and trauma. And a part of that care for oneself is rooted in mindfulness. So this, I learned from these parents so many amazing things, but learned that obviously that we all cope and parents cope, and that parents consciously buffer their children from trauma. And as a part of that buffering, they are creating time for stillness. Thank you so much, Brazelton, and everyone out there listening. I was really so, and I continue to be so moved by the families that I worked with, and so moved by my learning and knowing about that really in many ways, the families that I worked with were decolonizing mindfulness, that they were always mindful and that mindfulness lives in them. And they may not be going to yoga or Tai Chi or doing other things that many upper middle class families or parents are doing, but they have mindfulness inherently in them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thomas. So much important work, so many comments appreciating what you've brought us today. And I am thinking about the mindful presence that you brought to these conversations with parents, to be in this process of decolonizing mindfulness with them, and to be with them, to listen to their wisdom and their strength. I'll just mention one comment, which is, yes, prayer. Prayer is such a great way for the Father to give us rest. Thank you so much, Dr. Thomas. I'm now going to turn to Galia in Israel, and we're a little bit over time because my audio wasn't working at first. But Galia, take the time you want, and folks, stay with us as long as you can, because we've got a lot of wonderful work to do with Galia as well. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Over to you, Galia.
Karibu. Karibu means welcome in Swahili. So welcome, everyone. I'm so grateful and honored for being here. So many of us chose to gather here now to deepen our intention of connection in these challenging times. So a deep bow to all of you for that and for hanging on this interesting page in the history book we are living right now. It is said that without standing on a threshold for longer than is comfortable, we deny ourselves from the experience of seeing beyond our old familiar stories, beyond all that we have become habituated to. That staying with the discomfort, really feeling into it, opens to a wider, more inclusive world that lies in waiting before us. So let's take together a deep, soft inhale and a long exhale, sitting or standing here together. Maybe we can take another one. Connected with our comfort and discomfort, being brave enough to dive together into a story I will tell you now. As just said before, it is nighttime here in Israel, so let me tell you a bedtime story. So this story takes place in Africa. Once upon a time, there were two women, two dreamers and weavers of dream. One lives in the US and the other in Kenya, Lorraine and Lillian. When they met, they used to greet each other. Achamege mising, which means in Swahili, do you love yourself? Yes, I love myself much. This is how the Kalenjin tribal women greet each other in the area of Mount Elgon, a tall extinct volcano on the border of Uganda and Kenya. The volcano may have been extinct for many years, but local tribal strife has erupted regularly. Lots of fires of anger and fights around land and struggle for local power happened in that area. Lots of atrocities I will not really mention and get into details right now, but they were witnessed by children. So these two brave dream weavers decided to bring some of those survivors' women, babies, children, and teens to a safe zone for a few days where they will be given some tools to deal with the experienced trauma. All that seemed unreal at the time, but as dreamer weavers do, they continue to hold the wish in their hearts and contact other souls to cooperate. So last year, a group of 11 people from around the globe flew to Kenya, hoping to bring mindful self-compassion tools to those people. I was blessed to be one of them, working with the children. Their dream came true. Project Haruma was born. And Project Haruma in Swahili means compassion. We felt honored and excited to offer mindful self-compassion tools, but also anxious and apprehensive. We tried to research as much as we could about the cultural rituals, the dancing, the singing, the drumming, and its effect on resilience and the resource building. But nothing could really prepare us properly to this most moving and life-changing experience. So you can see some of the women and children in the slides. So just imagine a very hot day in Africa, which was the assigned day. 38 women, 7 babies, and 30 children aged 8 to 18 arrived in a dirty yellow bus exhausted from the long and bumpy trip, but exhilarated to be leaving their village area for the first time and participating in this adventure. We were prepared by Lillian to greet them in a certain way when they arrived. The women, babies, and children came out of a packed bus, and instead of seeing tired people, we met a group singing and dancing. We were standing in a row, and each and every one of us gave a warm hug, heart to heart, and a specific handshake, with each and every one of them. It was so touching and moving. No eye stayed dry. It was really the most uplifting mindfulness practice I have ever done. Taking the time to really be for a moment with each and every one of them, looking in the eyes, feeling the warm connection of the hearts. I felt blessed and so thankful for being able to experience that. So, for us now here, to get a taste of this regulation practice done with movement, we will try, if you wish, to move together right now. So when I was in Kenya playing, experiencing many things with the children, they taught me many songs and dances. They showed me many tools and resources that they use in their daily life. We laughed a lot and enjoyed ourselves while being very mindful of what was happening in the moment and being able to befriend ourselves. You know, there are moments, I don't know if this happens to you too, when meditation, sitting still like a frog, feels not accessible. We can feel out of balance, a bit jumpy, and irritable. So then we can put some music on, come back to a sense of home in our own bodies, shake and dance. So let's try that right now. We have been sitting here for so long. So if you feel like joining in right now, you're most welcome to do so. And if you feel like staying seated, it is also great. If you feel like closing your eyes and just listening or zoom out, or if you don't want to be seen on the screen, you can close the camera or dance outside of its range. So I'll get up also. I think you could find some music in the chat box, or you can do that with me, even without music. So first thing, let's feel our feet touching and being supported by Mother Earth. And if we have music on, we can move with the music. And if not, we have all the time internal music we can listen to, just moving with the body, listening to my body and what it needs right now. And maybe it is very small, soft movements, maybe big movements with rough edges. Maybe we feel we need to shake our hands, our arms, our legs, our hips, our head. Come on, let's shake it. Great. Okay. Now let's take our fingers and just dip them in different bright colors. So imagine white, yellow, orange, red, purple, blue, and green. So we have lots of colors dripping right now, and just let the color drip a little bit. Great. And now let's close this very short practice by gradually letting our body to slow down the movement. And we'll just draw with our colored fingers beautiful shining rainbows. So let's lift our arms up with the inhale and bring them down to the sides of our body with the exhale. And let's make another rainbow. Inhale up and exhale down. And one last time. Inhale up, great rainbows. And slowly down. Wonderful. So let's feel our body right now as we are standing, feeling ourselves, aware of our feelings, and maybe slowly finding our way to a sitting position, or you can remain, of course, standing if it feels the right posture for you right now. Breathing, feeling whatever you're feeling in your body, giving it room, acknowledging your emotions. When it looked like the sun would not shine anymore, God put a rainbow in the clouds. So we had many beautiful rainbows right now. So now that we experienced the bit of the work done with the children, working with trauma-sensitive mindfulness and self-compassion, I relied on the wise elders, finding ways to describe the world's energy. The ancients believed the world to be composed of 4 basic elements: fire, water, air, and earth. These were considered the critical energies, forces that sustained life. All these elements are parts of matter, or the physical universe, and the human body is a physical creation existing in the material realm. Those Kenyan children lost their balance and witnessed atrocity. It was really hard to even imagine how it feels like to experience such trauma. We tried to be mindful and sensitive to the trauma they suffered from, being present with them and their suffering, open to their ritual and inner strength, honoring their heritage, their language, their inner landscape, not teaching them, not imposing anything, just proposing, inviting to connect to their own resources, bridging the possibility to connect to the joy that lives in our body, to playfulness and imagination, to be able to run freely and laugh, connected, aware, calming themselves, regulating themselves while playing and having fun. All that was done step by step in a few days, building trust while creating a solid container they would eventually trust. Every day was based on one element. The idea behind it was based on the notion that when all the elements are balanced, we can move and operate in the world in a resilient way. So every morning, the children group started by welcoming ourselves. So you're welcome to join right now, saying the phrases with me and with the hand gestures. So putting our hands on our heart, I'm here for myself. Opening our hands to the group as to embrace it, I'm here for others. Others are here for me. I'm here for myself. I'm here for others. Others are here for me. Niko hapa kwa ajili yangu. Niko hapa kwa ajili ya wengine. Wengine wako hapa kwa ajili yangu. We said this out loud in Swahili, and may gesture, as we did right now, and you could maybe tap right now into the sensations of those gestures and what is it creating in you. It became an important setting that gave lots of safety to the group. As every tale, this one also has wonderful results, as the mothers of the children reported that the children who attended the workshop felt more calmness in their sleep and did better in academic performance. During this period of COVID-19, when they are at home and these feelings could erupt, the mothers report that the children are rather calm. So if you're interested in Project Haruma, you could find more about it in the chat box. And so, as a closing, in the spirit of our gathering, let us pause right here, right now, from all the stories and where it took us, reflecting and feeling many things inside ourselves. You might close your eyes or lower your gaze, or just keep looking at an object in your range. And just take a few full breaths and invite yourself to be right here in this moment with all that right now. You might sense the possibility of bringing an intimate attention to whatever your inner experience is in this moment. Perhaps even offer yourself a gesture of kindness. It could be a touch of your hands on your heart or any other supportive touch or word. Maybe just a sense of bringing care to your own being. And notice what happens when you do that. When there is such intentional kindness inward, caring for yourself. And then widening the attention, imagine, visual, sense all of us. Here we are in our individual spaces, rooms, homes, behind screens, all with the same yearning to wake up our hearts and our awareness. And you might mentally whisper, we are together here. We are friends. And just sense how our lives might be if we really fully trust and live from that sense. We are together. We are friends. What a profound healing to the world. We are together among friends. Slowly, if you wish, opening your eyes, holding this feeling of us being together as friends, not as separate beings. We are all gathered here to remember what most matters to us and pay attention in a way that manifests that. We can divide forever upon any given criteria, or we can have the intention of finding ways to meet this fear or threat with compassion and maybe feeling less pulled toward this division and isolation. Having the intention of befriending each other, being united together with, and not to exclude our uniqueness, bringing kind attention to our fear, and holding it with care, attending its needs with compassion. No judgment towards this natural happening in us. Remembering we are together, we are friends, we are all made as forms of being, oneness of all life. If real change is going to manifest in this world, we need to be in it together. Through the shadow and the pain, a turning will come. And if we stand together, this war will be won. We remember that what we look at with love looks back at us with love. May we be on the lookout for joy, wonder, and care in each moment. Barakatele, blessing in abundance. Asante sana. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Galia. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Candice, for joining us today. If you're able to, could you please just come back to us with your video so we can see you? And for those of you who have been participating, thank you for being with us and for all of the appreciation. Someone said, I will definitely be watching parts of this again. So beautiful. And we had rainbows. You talk about rainbows. There were rainbows in the chat, for real. So if everybody who is still with us, if you could just leave us with a word that we can hold on to from you, we would be most grateful for a word that you could leave us with. And I am going to remember the dipping our fingers in the paint and having it drip and shine for sure. That's when you got me. And hard to get, but you got me. And the play and fun and trust and looking with love, decolonizing mindfulness to honor the mindfulness that has always been there, the intergenerational wisdom that is there to heal the intergenerational trauma, and Jerry Paul telling us that how we are is as important as what we do. So look at all of the words coming in. These will be in the recording for you all to see when you come back and listen again. And I'm not going to say goodbye. I'm going to ask you to come back in July when we'll be launching our webinar series on doing the work that we all do virtually online, because guess what? I think we're going to be doing that for a while, my friends. And to join us in the fall for our Conversations for Change, Learning to Listen. When that series picks up again, we'll be hearing about immigration policy and its harmful effects on children and families. We'll be hearing about working with fathers who've experienced sexual abuse during childhood. And we'll be talking with a transgender couple about raising children and their families. So come back in July, and please do come back and be moved by all of our wonderful presenters today on the Brazelton Touchpoints website or YouTube page. Thank you so much for being with us. Be healthy and be safe, and take care of yourselves. Bye.